I see folks rolling in. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm not sure if we're gonna fill the full 60 minutes today. I guess that'll depend on how many amazing insights Joe and Jane have to share with everyone. So we might also fill beyond the time. And I guess it'll depend on questions as well. But I just want to kick off from the Alliance side. We'll do introductions in a second, but just kind of welcome everybody and thank you for attending this both live or watching it in posts. And with that, I'll kind of go to some, I guess, housekeeping, as I always call it, before we begin. All participants are muted upon entry just by default. So, if you have the dogs barking, which hopefully my dogs don't bark because I won't be muted this whole time. Or you get a package delivered, no big deal. You'll be muted. You may turn live captions on. We do have live captionings available via the Zoom. We will also post the recording afterwards with captions. Please, please, please use the Q&A feature. You can post any question you want. I will be doing my best to view my other screen over here and watch for those in real time because we'd love to answer questions in real time as you have them. But as I noted, the on-demand accessible recording will be shared very shortly after the webinar will be posted on our website. I know the Van team will also be sharing that as well. So if you happen to have to jump off early and you think you're going to miss something, we will be sure you get the recording after the fact. But with that, I'm going to kind of jump into kicking things right off with introductions for today's webinar, which is the growth-minded agency's approach to accessibility. And I'm super excited to have some of our best friends here today. So I'll give a quick introduction to me and my role. I'm more of the quarterback of the MC today, and then we have the experts from Van Group who I'll let introduce themselves, who are going to kind of lead the show, which is fun for me. So quick introductions to me and my role. My name is Ryan Wieland, physically located in far northern Wisconsin, as I call it, the Great White North in the winter. It's not the winter right now. It's actually nice out and the sun is shining, which is great. I've been here at Alliant for almost 9 years, coming up on my 9-year anniversary. So I've been in the accessibility space for a while. And my official title here at Alliant is VP of Digital Accessibility Sales. So I get the opportunity to work with not only our amazing partners like the Van Group and our great friends over at their team, but really organizations across the globe and across really every industry you could imagine on helping them build and scale their digital accessibility practices and solutions. So with that, Jane, I will hand it to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jane. I'm the Director of Growth here at Van, which means I get to chat with our merchants and prospective merchants about what it is that they're looking for and how we might be able to be helpful to them. And then from there, gather their requirements and right scopes of work for them to bring on new merchants and new projects. Excited to be here. Thanks so much for the invite, Ryan. I will pass it to Joe.
Hey everybody, I'm Joe. I'm the Director of Product and Strategy here at Van. So my team and I are charged with safeguarding what we deliver for our clients to make sure they match client expectations and deliver at the highest level. And of late, one big piece of that has been UX and specifically accessibility around UX. So very apropos and current topic for us.
Thank you both. And with that, I'll kind of go through just a quick agenda. And today's agenda is fairly open-ended and I mean that in the best way possible, right? We've done our introductions, we've kind of welcomed you to the webinar. We're gonna give a little bit of an overview of who is Alliant. I will let Jane and Joe talk about who is the Van Group and what do they do every single day, and then we'll talk about how we collaborate and kind of just dive in on today's topic on really helping build and scale accessibility from start to finish and some of the amazing insights that the Van Group brings to the table on how they've done this for clients, which I think is a really good story. So it's going to be very conversational intentionally. And we definitely, like, as I mentioned, if you have questions, fire them into the chat. I have that open over here. We'll try to answer those things in real time, but we will also have, I think, some time at the end for Q&A. Should we get to Q&A there? So with that, I'll kind of give a brief introduction into Alliant, who we are, how we came to be. If you do the Google engine search and search Alliant, I think the formal launch of the organization was September of 2022, but our roots are significantly deeper than that in the accessibility space. So we are really the amalgamation of three best-in-class accessibility organizations that came together to form the Alliant umbrella or the Alliant organization. The first one is T-Base Communications, who's been the 30-plus year leader in alternative formats. So printing things like large flow reprint or Braille, think like student textbooks, right? We convert those textbooks to Braille to ensure that low vision or blind students can get educated and have access to that printed material. Common Look is our PDF division, the 20-plus year leader in accessible PDF and digital documents. And Accessible 360 is the organization that I come from, where we have worked with Joe and Jane for many years. So Accessible 360 and now the Alliant Digital Division is our digital accessibility division, supporting organizations across the globe on digital accessibility of their websites, mobile applications, customer portals, you name it. We can test it and help you drive accessibility of those digital solutions. End to end, we create the only full service solutions provider in this space. As part of that extension, because a big part of where the partnership comes to be, and I'll talk about that in a second, is we focus 100% of our niche expertise of our almost 400 global employees on accessibility. We don't do any of the amazing stuff that the Van Group does. So, Jane, I will hand it to you. I'll let you talk about the amazing work that the Van Group does, and then I'll kind of talk about like how we partner together, and that'll kind of steer today's conversation.
Sounds like a plan. Van is a dev design agency focused on building websites, specifically on Shopify. We're a Shopify Platinum agency, and we're really known for our brand conversion design process, which is the balance of the branding that happens and the storytelling that happens on the website with those conversion, average order, CRO elements that need to happen on the website as well. And the reason that we're predicated on this format is because it's easy to create a website, or it's possible to create a website where it's very branded and focused on storytelling, and people are rage clicking all around trying to figure out how they can actually check out on the website. And then on the other hand, you can create a website that is so optimized for performance that if you cover the logo in the top left-hand corner, you can't even tell what the brand is anymore. So we specialize in creating these optimal websites that balance the two. We work on projects, things like redesigns and migrations for brands, but we also do ongoing optimization and improvements to websites as well. What else is important? We've been around for 10 years. We've built hundreds of sites. You might know our work from Hexclad, Lands End, some of the Unilever brands in their portfolio, Rode. But we work with celebrities, beauty brands, apparel brands, home brands. We're not industry specific. We're focused on building excellent e-commerce experiences. And again, focused on the development and the design of said experiences. So that's a little bit about Van and what it is that we're focused on, Ryan.
Perfect. Thank you, Jane. And I think that jumps into sort of how do we work together, right? And what are the some just a snapshot of the brands that we've worked together. And I think this is where we really start to drive the conversation, right? Because as we went through, Alliant focuses and specializes in accessibility. That's all that we do. But all of our clients have a website, a mobile application, something that was designed or built by someone like the Van Group, right? And that's really where the synergy begins in the sense of Van is amazing at what they do, Alliance amazing at what we do, and it just creates a really natural partnership and bringing best in class solutions for our shared clients. But I think through that process and through that progress over time, we also learn a lot about each other and we learn how to push each other. And I think that's one of the things I really respect from the Van Group and the expertise that you're going to hear on today's call of they face completely different challenges when you think about accessibility and digital accessibility with their clients than we face or even see here at Alliant, right? We get brought in kind of late in that process after a lot of that thinking, planning, project build out has been done or thought about, and then we just come and bring our expertise. So I'm really excited for Jane and Joe to kind of talk about how do you embed accessibility or how do you have that conversation with your clients, and maybe where does that synergy start with bringing Alliant in? Jane, Joe, I know you both have worked with Alliant for many years. Anything to add from the partnership side before I kind of like unshare and start to jump into the core of today's conversation, which is going to be very conversational?
Yeah, I would just say that there's a lot of accessibility partners in the space, or a lot of partners that claim to be accessibility partners. But we found a lot of success working with your team with these brands as well as many others, the ones that you see here on the screen, because you guys have been easy to work with for us and support our merchants, and they like working with you. So we're grateful to be invited to something like this to talk about the shared work together. And I think the merchants here on the screen, as well as the others that we've worked with, help to tell that story. Joe, did I miss anything? Anything to add?
No, I just echo the same statements. I think it's really important for us to have a partner to support our merchants. More and more important every year, it seems. So I think it's been fantastic to work with Alliant.
Perfect. So with that, I'm gonna actually stop sharing and just kind of like let us talk about accessibility collectively. So I'm going to start, like I said, I'm kind of the MC. I'll add flavor and flair where where needed, based on Joe and Jane's answers. But I'm just going to kind of let you guys be the experts and kind of share your story on accessibility and how this matters and gets embedded for your clients. So, I think the first question is maybe the obvious one, but I think this is kind of the jump start for everything, which is, what prompted or promoted your agency to prioritize accessibility as part of like your core offering or just embedding this into client projects?
Yeah, I think I think it became a really high priority for us a few years ago. At the end of the day, we are very client driven. It's the nature of our business. Of course, every agency on the planet is client services, but the nature of the work we do, because it is so design forward, there's questions always around like how we approach design and so on. And one of the things that has become prevalent, very top of mind for us, is kind of the governance piece. A lot of our clients were starting to come to us and asking about, got a lawsuit, or I knew a friend of mine works at a brand that got sued. A few different angles to that conversation, but I mean, perhaps unsurprisingly, that's the big driver.
Mhm.
That's where we started. Where we are today, I think, is a little bit different in that that's still very top of mind for us. But in the process of working with you guys and working with our merchants, we do kind of think about accessibility very early on. And it is sort of baked into our process, and it is kind of socialized within the agency at a broad level. So I would go a little bit further and say nowadays it's almost a procedural thing for us. It's just one of the things that we do when we're designing.
Yeah, I think Joe, that's a great point. I think that's something that, whether you're working with an agency or not, right? Like that's something that any digital project can take away from that, right? A brand from any industry, any organization. And I think you're going to kind of hear that flow through in today's conversation of bringing accessibility to the forefront earlier rather than later. So I really appreciate that because I do think whether we think about, the Title III space, not the Title II space. Title II is in my mind because of all the things going on in government and accessibility, but the Title III space in the Shopify space, etc. Like I think there is so much reactive accessibility, and I really appreciate that you guys are bringing that up front in the conversation because it sets you up to be much more defensible, which we'll probably get to later in the conversation. But I appreciate that. And then I think something that is a topic or a conversation or a question that anyone can learn from at any point in their accessibility journey, but certainly from you guys, having done this many times, like how do you present accessibility to your clients? Like how does that come up and how do you sort of broach that topic?
Yeah, it's tough because it could be a scary thing when someone is getting sued, or it feels like this really big thing to try and tackle. So trying to break it down and not use any fear-based language is important to us. There's a lot of acronyms and different components of this legalities that can make it feel overwhelming. So we really try and make it accessible, to talk about accessibility if I could there, because I think at the end of the day, accessible commerce is good commerce. If
Mm.
people can't navigate your PDP checkout, move through the cart in an efficient way, you're losing revenue, whether or not that person has a disability or does not. We want to make sure that we're setting our merchants up to be capturing that revenue as a part of our process and a part of the success that we have as an agency. But positioning accessibility as a way to future-proof the website and make sure that we're thinking about how the website is presenting to our clients is certainly important to us. We try our best to talk about the standards that we're building to, WCAG 2.2 AA compliance, which again is one of those acronyms that can feel super scary if you're not necessarily familiar with what is encompassed there, but talking about what's covered in our process, what we don't do, I think is really important as well because we can't provide a letter of certification when we would typically introduce a partner like Alliant. I think is an important thing to talk about. And then we're also positioning this outside of our calls in our scopes of work. We have an accessibility commitment of what we are guaranteeing. Because sadly, what we have heard through the builds that we've done and the merchants that we've worked with is they've worked with other agencies in the past who have built them a new website and then they come to find out it's not accessible. It hasn't been built with accessibility in mind. And now there's this big bill associated with the remediation it's going to need to happen to create an accessible website and an accessible experience for everybody. So the way that we've presented accessibility, I think, has evolved over time, but it comes up in all of our conversations and presents in the scope there as well, Ryan.
No, I appreciate that. And I think a couple of things there, Jane, that I think something you said is something I've talked about with clients, again, regardless of industry for a long time. And I think it's something you guys do so well. It's like not just making it about like just a screen reader user or just a keyboard user or just risk mitigation, right? Like accessible design is, and we'll probably cover this a little more later on in the question, but accessible design is great design, right? And I think it's easy to have like a closed-minded approach of like, oh, this only affects a limited amount of users, but you're right, like that can flow through to the sort of conversion flows for everybody, not just a user of assistive technology. So I love that point, Jane. And then, something you said something there that I'm gonna pull on, which is a lot of clients and merchants, and I think there's a big learning in this from the merchant side, get websites built or have a website design that they think is accessible because it was like, yeah, we do accessibility. Like an agency just saying we do accessibility, right? And of course we know accessibility. So, is there certain language that you guys use in scoping documents to make that clear? Like, how do you guys approach that? And as far as like actually educating your merchants? Because I think that's a thread I want to pull on because that's a
Yeah.
really important topic.
Yeah, it actually connects back to the Alliant audits that we received back from you guys and what the findings are there. So we have specific language in our scopes of work that call out for any priority one, critical, blocking, or high priority items that if those are found after the site is built, that our team will remediate that at no extra cost because
Great.
it is a standard that we're promising. And if it's blocking a letter of certification from the accessibility standpoint, then we haven't done our job. So that language is specifically in the scope and maps back to the Alliant audits that you guys provide there.
And I think that's such a, I commend you guys. And I know we talked about this in a case study, and I have a quote in there where I just give you guys a ton of credit for actually standing up and delivering accessible solutions. And I think it's like, look, you're not doing this internally. You're not just running an automated scan, but you're having us do a thorough audit, including people with disabilities. And then you're standing up and saying, hey, if we built you something that wasn't compliant, we're going to fix that. So, and I think that's really important for merchants to understand and just like ask the right questions and know what you're actually getting when your agency talks about accessibility, because ultimately you're the one who's at risk downstream. So I think that's a great point. I really appreciate that feedback. And then I think, the next question I'll ask is one that I think is a problem, whether you say Shopify or not, regardless of industry, it's always the budget conversation. So how do you all, because as I think you have some really interesting insight in this, like how do you guys work with organizations that the accessibility topic comes up, they might want to do accessibility, but they're working on a small budget. Like how do you broach that topic?
Yeah, it's about prioritizing impact. I think there's this like mindset that it's kind of all or nothing, like either the site is accessible or it's not
Mm.
accessible. But there's actually a lot of work that can be done to make progress over time towards accessibility. So looking at fundamentals like color contrast, core pages, user flow, making sure that those pages are optimized for accessibility, again, goes back to those good commerce practices and make sure that we're addressing with whatever budget is there the pieces that matter the most.
No, and I love that, Jane, because I think that's something we talk with a lot of clients about as well. And that's where I think, again, there's a lot of synergy in the partnership in the sense of I do think organizations a lot of times think about it as accessibility as, for lack of a better term, black and white, all or nothing, right? And it's like accessibility is not black and white. There's because like let's just broach the topic for what it is. There is no website on the internet or no mobile application on the app store that's 100% compliant. But I think there is this like theoretical, I need to be 100% compliant and I need to do it tomorrow, right? Well, unfortunately, there is no easy button for accessibility. And I love that like you guys are kind of having that conversation of we can prioritize and we can solve this over 3, 6, 9 months, right? And that can help spread that budget out. So I really appreciate that insight, Jane, because I think that's something that's so important for, again, an organization, regardless of size, scale, budget on accessibility. It's like just start somewhere, right? Get on the path and get on the journey. And 12 months from now, you're going to be a lot more compliant than you are today. And I think another point that and I don't know if you guys have any thoughts in this, but I think there's also the technical debt point, right? It's like if you constantly delay the problem, you're actually constantly making your website less accessible over time, where it's like just start somewhere. So anything you guys would add to that? Because I think it's such an important topic when we think about accessibility.
Yeah, I think the tech debt piece is very real. I do think some of that is how you work also. So what I was saying earlier about trying to bake it into our process, what we found is that by our dev processes do have checks for accessibility. So less code goes out the door without some sort of touch around accessibility. Whether it's efficient or not, open question, that's why we need you guys. But the idea that not doing accessibility is cheaper is just flawed, right? Its
Mm.
core base premise is flawed because between the governance and the fines or lawsuits or whatever, um, alongside this idea of rebuilding things and the debt you're incurring over time, doing it better in the beginning will just save you more. You're shifting left there, right? So I
Yep.
think that's a big piece of it. That's an easy part of that conversation to have, actually.
No, I love that. And that's such a great point, Joe. And then this next question, and I get this might actually be a selfish question because I deal with a lot of organizations who have determined they want to talk about accessibility. You guys probably work with a lot more clients than even I do that you've built a website for. They're coming to you for design, and maybe the accessibility thing hasn't ever come up or they're not focused on it. So like what pushback do you guys get on accessibility? I think that's a really interesting topic to talk about because you guys deal with a lot of clients.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is pushback. The one you already mentioned, right? The one is, well, we can't do it won't be a perfect, or we can't get to the 100% compliance, whatever it might be, some version of that conversation. That's fairly common.
Mhm.
Another really big one, probably honestly in our space, in who we are and who we work with in terms of merchants and prospects, it's around design.
Mm.
So there is another kind of misconception around this idea that uh, a beautifully designed site can't be accessible. I think some of that's historical, like legacy thinking. The internet was very different a few years ago. I don't really buy into that. And in fact, one could argue just by looking at our portfolio, we've won awards for design. We've pushed some real boundaries. There's a lot of mimicry of the sites we've designed across the
Yeah.
internet. Uh, I don't think you get all that unless the designs are beautiful. And I have a lot of faith in our design team and what they put out. Alongside that, pretty much every site that we've launched is by and large accessible. There will be gaps, as you said, but things like arrow or point indicators on carousels. There's the number of times I've had the conversation that you must have this. It's nonsensical, but it's kind of a fight worth fighting because I do think that at the end, the output is both, engaging visually and also accessible. So.
No, I love that. And I think I'm gonna pull on that thread, Joe, is so how do you, because you mentioned a couple things that you do get pushback. I'm not shocked, right? And so how do you overcome that pushback? Like how do you bridge kind of some of the things you said of like not backing down and not fighting with the client, but like just like driving that apart. So how do you guys work to overcome that pushback? Because I think that's something even internal teams can learn. Because a lot of times I find most organizations have an internal champion that cares. And it's like, how do I convince everybody else that accessibility is important? So I think there's learnings in how you guys push back on that as an agency.
Yeah, I think on the one side of it, I think as you said, there's usually some folks internally at our merchants that are advocates
Yeah.
already. Some of that might be kind of shying away from the pain of lawsuits or that kind of thing. So there's
Mhm.
different reasons why that's true. So certainly finding those advocates, making sure they're engaged in the conversation, that's a big piece of it. The Some of it is in the validation around like the work we've done before. It's easy for
Mhm.
us to point to a brand like Rode and be like, that's largely an accessible design, still
Yeah.
considered a beautiful site. So I think we get a little bit of authority, and so our feedback is heard in that way. Some of it is kind of proof in the pudding of actually designing a thing that is lovely and also accessible. And I think that I mean I think this is probably a larger topic that we can explore, but no one wants to build something that is not engaging and not accessible, right? No one's setting out to create an inaccessible site. So I think
Yeah.
some of it is just shining the light, you know. This could engage with a larger segment of the population. These, the just by doing this one thing or this other thing, or approaching the visual design this way versus that way, you open up a different market almost of folks that can engage with your brand. And no one, at the end of the day, every brand wants to sell. So.
No, I love that. And I think that's something I'll kind of echo. I'll echo one key point there, Joe, because I was actually just on a call. yesterday with a very large nonprofit in here in the US with our VP of accessibility, who is legally blind. He's been blind for I think 17, 18 years. And he mentioned that to their team. He's like, look, I know like we did a screen reader demo of their site and it wasn't good. And that's okay, right? Like that's sort of where we come in and we can drive advocacy. And he let it off with like, you're gonna see some really bad things and really bad things on your website. And I know no one woke up this morning and said, geez, I don't want a blind person to be able to access my site. So I love that mentality of, and I think that's just awareness. And Joe, I don't know how much we've done with you on this front, but Jane, we've done a ton with you. We've even reaching out to our team and like having one of our blind engineers do a quick look, right? That's where we're happy to come in and be that partner to be like, here is some gaps today based on an actual blind individual going through your site. And if like these aren't major things, and a lot of times, Joe, to your point, when you see those types of issues, and I'll make a comment that I've heard our blind engineers say all the time, it's like I actually don't care what your website looks like. I can't see it. And like that's like no pun intended, right? Because it's like they're accessing the underlying code. And I think something you said there, Joe, of like overcoming those pushbacks, it's like there are multiple ways to make a site usable and work very well for assistive technology that doesn't sacrifice design. So no, I love that mentality and that thought process. And I think, again, Jane, that's where we've done that for a lot of your clients, like coming in, doing a screen reader demo, we're just calling out a few things where it's like, hey, we had a blind engineer from a line look at the site and here's some gaps, right? You're just building in that like methodology and mentality of that oh my gosh moment of oh my gosh, like we didn't want that. So I don't know if you guys anything to add to that, but I think there is an awareness piece of just calling those things for what they are. And to your point, Joe, like no one wakes up in the morning and is like, geez, I don't want the blind people to be able to access my site. Like it's just like how do we build that and bake that into the methodology internally?
No,
Um,
no,
no,
I
go
think
ahead.
I think you're spot on. I think the the times that we've been able to do that of actually giving a concrete evidence, obviously the message hits a lot better, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot more resonant when you're like, no, no, here's a real example. I do think that's a really powerful piece of the messaging working with you guys is being able to say this person who has this specific disability and this is how they engage with your site. It does make it more concrete. It does make it more real. And like I said, I think uh, no one wakes up in the morning and doesn't want someone to be able to unable be someone to not be able to use their website. So I think it's an easy way to kind of approach having that conversation.
No, I love it. And I think, on the topic of usability and doing the right type of testing, bringing individuals with disabilities into the conversation, which is truly, and I'm not saying this because of the Alliance side, it's truly the only way to make a site fully compliant or like truly usable to the end user that has a disability, right? So instead of shifting but also staying on that topic, like you guys deal with a ton of clients, right? And I think specifically in the e-commerce space, where I'm just gonna call it for what it is, like there's a lot of easy solutions or seemingly easy solutions, like just we're just gonna pop up an overlay. It's like, how do you guys get clients in the right frame of mind to prioritize accessibility that's done well? Because I'll just call it for what it is, right? Alliant is not as cheap as an overlay, but you're getting a significantly different level of accessibility and a much more usable site. So I'd love your guys' thoughts on like how do you get clients? Because I think it's something that probably a lot of organizations, like again, I go back to that champion. Every organization has a champion. The CFO or the CEO might be like, well, I saw so and so site with an overlay. Just pop that up for $50 a month. Like, how do you guys get clients out of that frame of mind to really prioritize good accessibility?
So I think the some of that is procedural. To pull that apart a little bit, I think there's the we have different types of engagements, right? We have the
Mhm.
projects, we have the retainers. On the retainers, I think it's just baked into our process and they kind of take our lead. So that's actually pretty straightforward, I think, because we approach things that way. And then, when we're introducing you guys, I think there's a little bit more authority and a little bit more trust in that regard.
Mhm.
Projects are interesting, right? So a lot of brands are really enthused and really kind of ready to go with, we're going to do this redesign, we're going to launch this new thing, it's going to be this big splash. Jane and team do a great job of engaging. Like really, it's in every SOW, there's a piece about accessibility. So they've had that conversation to
Mm.
greater or lesser extent to some degree. When we do get that kind of conversation around like, why not just do this other approach? I think a lot of it does come down to speaking to what the trade-offs are, right? So I think you said it earlier, every engagement with a client, there's some give and take. We can present our position. At the end of the day, if they want to override it or they feel really strong,
Mhm.
we're gonna comply, right? We're going to make sure that they get as best we can do within the framework they give us. But I do think there's a lot of education still, right? So if you're using an overlay, well, is that really going to get you to where you want to get to if compliance is your answer, right? And we can kind of speak to that, talk about examples, provide examples very directly, truthfully, uh, and also talk about how we manage that for the client on a redesign, right? So like I said, if it's in part of our process, yeah, there's a cost associated because of the nature of it, but the cost of not doing it, as we were talking about earlier,
Mhm.
if we just design things and built them, and then at some point in the future, the client gets sued,
Yep.
and then they come to you, and then they have to remediate it. Like when you amortize, you're amortizing these costs gradually over time, and perhaps not even taking incurring some of them, versus creating this sort of Damocles kind of hanging over their heads. I think those are really the same people that the CEO or the CFO that's bringing up that cost conversation. That's our conversation that'll resonate with them. That like just visibility and transparency around it.
Love it. I think that's such great. Oh, Jane, I think you were going to add something. So you go ahead.
Yeah, can I add something? I actually
Yeah.
think it's worse to have an overlay than nothing at all. I think we've seen in the last year, there's tools online where these firms that are presenting these suits can go and look up what tools folks are using, Wappleizer built with whatever it is, and we've actually seen those with overlays having a higher percentage of suits against them because these issues are still existing and can make things worse at times. So I'm team if there's an overlay, just get rid of it, even if we're not going to be working with Alliant or focusing on accessibility, because they have created challenges for merchants that are utilizing them, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I would just tell you, Jane, I can't speak for them. I don't personally have a disability myself, but our native assistive tech users, the many that we have here at Alliant, would agree with that sentiment. So they would fully agree. And I did notice I had the wrong Q&A panel up, window pane. I don't know if I used the right terminology there, so I missed a couple questions, but I'm going to jump to them now. So the first question, because we love answering these in real time, is, and I think Jane, this goes to something you said earlier, and again, I missed it, so I apologize for who asked this question. How do you measure accessibility as leading to increased conversions, and what is success from an expectation perspective? That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want me to speak to it? So the we do a lot of measures. So I can speak about our process. I don't want to speak, other people might do things differently. So I'm just going to give kind of the way we approach it. A lot of what Van does operationally is grounded in data. So every project we do, whether it's a retainer project, has a phase in the beginning where we're looking at site metrics, we're doing site speed audits, we're doing analytics audits, and trying
Mhm.
to identify both gaps, but also trying to set a baseline of what performance looks like, right? So we should be understanding things like conversion, click through on certain pages, most visited pages, add to carts, a lot of those kind of core metrics and trying to understand. So there's some underlying fundamental type metrics, and then there's these bigger metrics like conversion. So because we ground so much in that, it's pretty easy for us in the sense of there's a pre and a post measurement. So we're looking at things like if we're launching in October, what did your last October look like? What was the lift from September to October? So we do try to understand trends and kind of measure that way. So pretty grounded in the actual raw metrics themselves in terms of measurement. And the other thing I would say is that uh, I think, Brian, you actually said this earlier. Good UX is often going to be accessible. So
Mhm.
perhaps always, I don't want to make a tautological statement, but I put money on always. So it almost happens by accident that if you are
Mhm.
designing and thinking in an accessible way, the site becomes more usable. And almost every case that I've seen, more usable website equals better conversion. So alongside our work, it's pretty easy to measure that.
Joe, I don't know if the design team's gonna like by accident. When they hear that back, I think the design team works very hard to understand the priorities, what's needed. Ryan, your team has come in and presented specifically to our design and development teams to keep
Mhm.
us up to date on best practice, what's changing, making sure that we're building with those standards in mind. So as much as we want to think that these things are by accident, I think the design team works very hard to make sure that they're not, but make it look like it's by accident.
Yeah. No, and the one thing I would add to that, because I think it's a great question. You guys answered it perfectly. The other thing that I would, I'd pull on that thread Joe, like I mentioned, I don't have a disability, but I organically get to see them before and the after of the clients that I've worked with over time, right? And I truly mean this where both clients we've worked together on, but there's other clients, right, where there is no agency involved and it's just a large client that's just for whatever reason has never focused on accessibility. And to your point, Joe, it's like I go to their site 12 months post initial testing, right? And they've improved accessibility. They've done a fantastic job. And I think about myself and I'm like, this is much easier to use for me without a disability, right? Because I think about things like how many times have we all seen bad color contrast? And it's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, or navigations that are so complex for any user, not just a screen reader user or a keyboard user, right? And you simplify those menus and those workflows, or like really small font and really small button, like just little things where accessibility just makes the flow through the site so much easier. And again, when accessibility and design is done right, Joe, to your point, you really don't notice it, which is the great thing about accessibility. And so I really love the thoughts that you guys added because I totally echo that, right? I think it's like great and accessible design is better for everyone, not just like thinking about this narrow window of just the screen reader user, just the keyboard user. So I really appreciate that question, and I think it's a really great topic. So no, appreciate your guys' insight on that question. And then the other question that we got was, I guess this one's more for me, but I would obviously love your all's insight as well. Does the Alliance certification work to keep lawsuits like, from targeting your site? And how often should clients get an Alliant audit done to preserve that certification? This is a topic I could speak about for an hour. It could be a totally separate webinar. Maybe it needs to be. So Ellie, I really appreciate that question.
Spin-off
Um,
webinar for Ryan coming
yeah,
soon.
you gave me a new webinar topic, which I love. So happy to have a conversation, for 30 minutes after this call or in the future, because that we can get into the nitty-gritty details and the details on that. But I would say, like, look, yes, that's sort of the basis of what we had. Now, I would also take Alliant out of the picture and just think about accessibility as a whole. There is no vendor or law firm in the space. Again, we're always going to be the honest vendor, and that's something we will die on that hill as Alliant. There's nothing that you can do working with any vendor to fully prevent a lawsuit. If any vendor or solution tells you they're 100% going to prevent a lawsuit or a demand letter, it's false and you should probably run. And if someone on my team says that, please let me know. The way we think about that more is a highly usable and a highly accessible website is going to remove the really easy to find barriers that these plaintiffs are looking for, to your point, Jane. Like they're hunting sites with overlays because they know there's going to be barriers there. Any website with an overlay is going to have barriers, and there's an assumption from the plaintiffs, again, where you said, like, just remove it, right, wrong, or otherwise. There is an assumption from the plaintiffs that that is all you have done, right? You've not done any, and sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes those sites are actually pretty good in the underlying code, but it's almost putting this big bullseye up there because it's like, well, they're going to assume nothing's been done. So does it help prevent lawsuits? We absolutely believe it does. We actually just launched a case study last week that I'm happy to share with you, where a client had been targeted many times using automated solutions and they haven't been targeted since. And we have many stories like that. But the other part of that is litigation support after a demand letter lawsuit comes in. When you've been working with us, showing good faith effort, there was actually about a month ago a very landmark case in New York where the judge ruled if you can show continual progress and the right type of progress for accessibility, the case was actually dismissed. So will it full stop prevent a lawsuit or a demand letter? I would say no, just because we're going to be honest with you. Like they're always out there hunting, fishing, running automated tools to just try to find an easy copy or paste lawsuit. But does it help your risk mitigation in the litigation your team can very quickly do with Alliance Services after the fact? 1000%. Jane, Joe, I don't know if the legal side's the scary side, so I'm happy to take that. It looks like you guys don't want to touch
Yeah,
that.
all you, right?
All me. That's fine.
That's
And
why
then
we partner with
one
you guys, actually.
yeah, that's why you rely on us. Exactly. So, and then the other part of Ellie's question, which I think is a great one, is how often should clients be getting the audit done? I think this is a great one where Align has and this one might be one you guys can talk about in shared client scenarios where we have a very different belief. We don't operate under get an audit done and then we'll talk to you in 12 months and do another audit, right? I think, Joe, it's something we kind of talked about organically earlier on of like building this into your processes. So we do an initial audit in the partnership we have with Van Group. It works very easily because then they take those audit results, they remediate, we come back and we QA test. So it becomes very agile, quite frankly, where we're almost like retesting and reiterating against the remediation essentially in real time. That will get you to that letter of conformance or letter of certification. Generally within 3 to 6 months, I would say is the average based on Jane, some of your stuff earlier and like the prioritization, how much you work on it. And then our sort of approach at Alliant is generally as you're launching net new features or net new templates, and Joe, you kind of talked about this. You have a big sale coming up, or Van Group launches something new. We're kind of testing that in real time. So you're not waiting until 12 months down the line and then having it retested. It's just a little more like always on testing, but at minimum, we're generally retesting every 6 months and updating that certification because and again, this is where I'll let you guys jump in, add any other thoughts. It's like if you just do accessibility one time and then don't think about it, like stuff is constantly you guys know this better than anybody. Sites are evolving so rapidly nowadays. Things are being added. Like accessibility doesn't stop with the letter of conformance. And so that's what I would say. Jane, Joe, anything to add to that?
So yeah, I mean, I think the way that we work together becomes really straightforward. So perhaps it's a little bit of a finger on the scale so much, but the uh, I guess if you have a website that is not very volatile, that you're
Hmm.
just releasing products and that follow the same paradigm that you have existing, and you're just updating banners or something like that, and there's no text over images, there's ways you could probably get away with a low velocity of testing. So I do think there's a little bit of context around that.
Mhm.
But the as you said, I think most ecom, especially ecom brands that we work with, that's not the case. They're we're on with them to keep moving and to keep releasing new stuff. That is every 3 months we have a roadmap to fulfill. We plan it out that way. So necessarily, I do think there's a fair chunk of change for our brands. So what we see is kind of closer to what Ryan said around every 6 months or so, we need to go back to the well and make sure we're re-understanding how does accessibility look on the site. The earlier thing we said about how you do the fixes over time is relevant also, right? Because
Mhm.
to talk about challenges and things to overcome, one of the challenges is I want to do X, Y, and Z, and now you're telling me I have to do A, B, and C. And that goes back to this point around, well, no, not everything needs to be done at this moment at exactly this time. What can we do to fit this into the roadmap and think about things over a 6 month period, over a 3 month period, whatever it might be, to both remediate and release the new stuff. So that it's not an either or, it's in let's do this and.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great ad. And Jane, I don't know if you have anything to add before I
Oh, good. I think we've covered it. You go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I think that's where our prioritization also, Ellie, like when we deliver an audit, as the Van Group knows, we prioritize the issues based on practical impact to the end user. So Jane and Joe just kind of organically used some Alliant language earlier on, where it's like they prioritize remediation of the biggest, most critical issues because those are the things that are actually blocking an individual leveraging assistive technology that drive to that letter of conformance. And when we think about like go back to the risk mitigation conversation, no website on the internet is 100% conformant, but if you remove those core blockers and we can show through screen reader rebuttals through our accessibility claims team that a screen reader user or a keyboard user can actually use the site, can transact, can do what the plaintiff is theoretically claiming they can't, that's where you start to bake in risk mitigation. But Jane, I'm gonna let you jump in on any other thoughts you had.
I would just say we're not necessarily in the business of like day-to-day site maintenance, and it's really important to us that when we build a website, we've enabled non-technical users to go in and be able to make changes. So some of it on our side is an education piece, and when we're handing over in documentation, we do our best to explain the different accessibility elements and what needs to persist so that the work that we put into making the site accessible doesn't just completely deteriorate over time. So I think there's effort that goes in there for preservation too, Ryan.
No, I love that. I think that's a great addition of, and that's I think even a great takeaway for anyone with accessibility. It's like don't treat this as like a bug list or don't treat this as day to day. It's like you got to change the culture, and then this kind of just becomes baked into stuff that you're doing from an ongoing perspective. So I love that. Great questions. Sorry that I missed the questions in real time, but at least we went back and we answered them. So I'll kind of jump then to the next question that I have for you guys is Joe, you kind of talked about one earlier. But what are some of the common myths that you guys hear about accessibility relative to the projects and the work that you guys do?
Yeah, I think I mean the number one myth is definitely the design one, right? That beautiful design can't be accessible. To just touch on another one around I can't do the things I want to do and also make my site accessible. That honestly, that's the one that is uh, the harder conversation in some regards because
Mhm.
it's hard to give a client an understanding of like how we execute work so that these things can happen alongside each other, especially in like the sales process. Once they see it happen a couple of times, they kind of get it a little bit more, I think. But you know, the the third kind of pillar of that. So, you know, you're talking about how beautifully designed the site is, how much it costs me to some extent, right? In terms of what I'm doing. The timeline piece is another one around, well, you know, this conversation around like, well, you know, how much can I really get done in time? You know, how long is an audit going to take?
Yeah.
These are pretty standard conversations, and I think there's a uh, I'm gonna say use the word overwhelmed nature of it, of like there's just so many things to think about that rather than engage and kind of plan things out, a lot of times merchants are just like can't be bothered. I have to run my business. I gotta sell the next product. I gotta launch the next
Yeah.
product. And I think that's actually where both an accessibility partner and an agency can really, especially if we're collaborating, can really deliver a lot of value because that's the myth that I think you can really push around. No, no, we can manage that for you. That should not be your headache, right? So we'll you know we'll set up time with a client. This will be preceding your holiday sales on your highest volume.
Yeah.
We'll plan out the work to make sure those go out the door before the holiday, before we go into code freeze. So I think a lot of the expertise that we bring is actually like how you rebut that myth, right? Is this is something that we do every year pretty much across our portfolio.
No, and I love that. And Jane, anything to add? And then I have a
Yeah,
thought
I've
for
got
you.
one more that comes up
Yeah.
often, and that accessibility is just for a really small group of people. I
Yeah.
touched on this earlier. Good design, good UX is accessible, and it comes down to things like clear navigation so that people can
Mhm.
find your collections, and predictable interaction so that the website feels trusted overall, whether or not you have a disability that's leading you to use a screen reader or not. It's not just for a small group of people. Accessible design is good design overall.
No, I love that. I know we've said that a million times, but that's something that I think is so foundational with accessibility to just kind of keep reminding it is so important. And then, Joe, one thing I would just echo in the sense of a partnership, right? Where I think we work so well together and strategize around that. That is a myth that I actually didn't expect you to say. So I love that you brought up the myth of like, well, we don't have time or like it's going to take too long. Like I've had this conversation, I mean, sincerely 50 times in the last year of like, don't, and it might sound weird coming from the accessibility guy. Like we'll get a call from a client who's like, I'm launching my site next week and I need an accessibility audit. And it's like, well, that's not possible because it's like literally you're launching next Friday and it's currently Friday the week before. And they're like, well, then I'm just not going to do this. And it's like, well, that's the wrong mentality. Or, well, then I'm gonna have to delay my launch by 6 months. Well, A, not even close. But B, like there's some best practices, Joe. You kind of talked about this earlier on that we can work together, like get a strong accessibility statement up, do some like baseline color contrast stuff, at least show that you've started that process. And like we can almost work in the dark together. And what I mean by that is like you can still launch your site. Like, don't I say it all the time. And again, this is what might sound odd coming from the accessibility guy. Don't not launch your website because you haven't done an accessibility audit. Because guess what? Then you're never going to do accessibility. Like it's just you're always going to constantly punt this down the road where like let's get that audit scheduled for next week. Let's start it. Let's in the next 3 months, 6 months, we're going to make your site significantly more accessible. And I kind of go back to that rooted foundation of no website on the internet's 100% accessible anyways. We can prioritize the issues in the first 2, 3 weeks. A lot of times you guys are solving those highly critical barriers very quickly. And then we can start to prioritize the other ones. So I love that myth of like, well, I don't have time or like I'm just not going to do it because I was too late. It's like there's never a wrong time to start it, and it doesn't delay things, and it's not like you have to pause launching something or you need to not have us do an audit because you just went live. Like you don't even know that we're there. We look like just like any other consumer doing audit in the background. The issues are in the background. A lot of times you guys are fixing on a staging environment. Like there is a process in place when we work together. So I love that thought because I think that's one where it's always like it's always the wrong time if you think about it the wrong way, right? Versus like just get started and start to improve accessibility as quickly as possible. So I love that thought. And kind of with that, I'm gonna ask the loaded question and hopefully I like the answer. But like, why did you guys seek outside support from Alliant when thinking about accessibility? Because I think I know the answer, but I'd love for you guys to. keep me
Yeah,
honest.
I think it's the human piece. You guys have a team of auditors that allow you guys to do this work. We're focused on being excellent at the development and the design side. You guys are focused at being excellent on the accessibility side. So really kind of knowing our limits and calling in partners when we need support is how our business is set up. And you guys have been the easiest to work with. In that I mentioned, there's lots in the space focused on accessibility, but you guys have kept our merchants happy from a pricing perspective, from a working perspective, and it's been great to work together on that. I would say you guys also keep us up to date on the evolving standards of accessibility
Mhm.
so that we're not having to track down that information. So every time I get on a call with you, Ryan, or Lisa or Aaron, whoever on the team that we're joining, you guys always have these stories that we're able to take back to our merchants of these lawsuits that have happened or of these different rulings that have happened and how they impact the space. So I would say the expert knowledge, the humans that you guys have, and the fact that it's not an automated tool that you guys
Mhm.
are running are really important to us. We can run AI automated systems all day long, but at the same time, they're not driving the same results as the human auditors that you guys have on your side. So that's the reason why we've worked with you guys, and I think the reason that our merchants have had success working with you guys too.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that that context is, and I'm going to go to kind of my last question, just in looking at the time, which is me giving you guys props back. And I think there's a big pitfall with agencies in this space. And I think there's a big problem with agencies and how they position accessibility. So I kind of want to hand it to you guys to talk about how, like, how is your commitment to accessibility a differentiator for Van? Like, how do you guys think about that? And then I can kind of layer on the cherry on top, hopefully, with my thoughts at
Yeah,
the end.
sure. I don't think merchants necessarily are coming to us specifically for accessibility.
Mhm.
Like, that's not what we're known for. We're
Yep.
known for the development and the design. That's why they come to us. But the reason that they stay and that we have such long tenure with the merchants that we work with is because of the strategic thinking that goes into things. So in conversations, maybe they're not necessarily thinking about accessibility right away, but the fact that we are gives them peace of mind that we are future thinking, future proofing the website and building what they're going to need for right now, as well as thinking into the future gives them
Mhm.
some security. That's really Joe's team in particular, that strategic thinking side. Joe, I don't know if you have anything else to add there.
I mean, I think you covered it. I think the what my team does and what the design team does. I think we end up being the two teams that engage most directly here. And I think when we talk about those myths and those kind of beliefs, when we're able to kind of speak that the idea of overcoming those objections and those
Mhm.
myths actually is quite a differentiator, I would say, in our sales process, that we're very open about having these conversations and pushing back and having this point around we don't want you to get sued, which seems to resonate pretty well, I would say, with brands. So I do think that our the way we've baked it in actually ends up being quite the positive for us.
No, and that's where I appreciate that answer, and I'll give again, I'll put the cherry on the top where I think I just want to give you guys credit again. I gave the credit in the case study, but I just think you guys having bringing the conversation early on, right? Because one thing I'll echo, Jane, is your exact point. People are coming to you because you guys do build amazing websites, you win design awards, you guys are best of breed on Shopify and building sites for clients and really managing merchants. But the reality is, you're also having the early accessibility conversation. I'll just kind of say something that maybe is obvious, maybe it's not in the spirit of today's webinar, is you can work with Van and not work with Alliant. Like that's like there that you can totally do that, and that's totally okay. I think it's just where I give you guys credit is having the early conversation versus Joe, to your point of, and look, I appreciate the referrals from agencies that we get where they don't have the conversation until a client reaches out and says, I just got a demand letter or lawsuit. And they're like, oh, we work with the Lion. Well, that's in a way that's kind of working with the Lion, but like we could have solved this many months ago and had the client in a much better place to actually litigate that case, right? So I think you bring up a great point of like whether it's measuring the metrics and the conversions, but also just doing the right thing. Like there is an element of that in, quite frankly, the legal side, as I say all the time, should never be probably the leading point of an accessibility conversation, but it absolutely should be part of your strategy, right? And Joe, I'm going to go back way back to one of the first things you said of like finding those champions, but also bringing in and finding other champions in the organization, right? Don't be afraid to ask your or bring in your legal counsel, external or internal, and have them be part of the conversation because people listen to lawyers. And having that conversation of like you might be the internal accessibility champion that's working with Van and you're having trouble getting that budget, bring in your legal team. Have them part of that conversation because risk mitigation is a big part of the conversation. So again, I will echo and give you guys all the props in the world of like having the honest conversations and pushing back a little on like all the myths we talked about. It's like I can't have a great looking website if it's accessible because you guys kind of cut through that noise and really do good by your clients. So with that, I'm gonna kind of jump. Jane, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I know one of the things we've talked about a lot and I so much appreciate about Van is you guys do a great job of bringing it back to the why. Because again, we had a lot of the why in today's conversation, but it is sometimes accessibility is not always rooted in the why. It is very reactive, or like I don't want to get sued, or I have been sued in the past, and it's all legal, legal, legal. But at the end of the day, there's a human element to this. I don't know if Jane, you want to talk a little bit about like this quote from your CTO and just like the why that the Van Group brings to the conversation.
Yeah, this quote's out of our case study that we released together not long ago. Alarian, our CTO, his son has unique accessibility needs and he cares deeply about accessibility, has really been a strong leader on the technical side for us. And we see this throughout his development team. We actually had Paulina, one of our developers, put Vaseline on some goggles and do some testing herself to try and see what it would really be like to navigate a
Love it.
website with a screen reader. And building that empathy and understanding the why, I think is always important. And Orion says it very well here.
Love it. Love it. Love it. I don't see any other questions in the box in the spirit of time. I'll kind of keep an eye on it over here, but in the spirit of time, I'm going to kind of wrap up our last few slides today. So one being contact information. I know Jane and Joe have great social media presence, social media following. Connect with us all on LinkedIn. We're always talking about just all things accessibility, but also all things from the van side, the amazing work that they're doing with their clients to drive not only accessibility, but conversions and sales and revenue. And then if you have any questions for the van group, obviously Jane and Joe's emails are on the screen. If you have any accessibility conversations for me, my contact information is on the screen as well. And with that, we just want to thank everybody that attended live or everyone that watches this in post for taking time out of your day to focus on accessibility, get back to that why, and really drive this forward, not only with your agency, but also, for your organization and your brand. Jane, Joe, anything to add? Otherwise, I'll kind of wrap things up.
Thanks for having us. This was fun.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks all. Have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.